Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Oregon Community Foundation Community Grants Program 2026 Spring Information Session. We're so happy to have each and every one of you here. That number of attendees is going to continue to creep up, but we want to be mindful and respectful of your valuable time. So we'll go ahead and get started. By way of quick introduction, my name is Kim Koenig, and I lead our community programs efforts here at Oregon Community Foundation. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm based in the Portland office, but my background that I picked today is my very favorite, one of my favorite spots on the way out to Central Oregon, the Crooked River Bridge. And if you haven't stopped at that exit, you need to take a peek at the beautiful views there. It's definitely worth a little bit of a sidebar trip. Um, this information session is for our applicants who are interested in applying for our spring cycle of community grants. I'm going to go through a couple of housekeeping items to talk about how we're going to run our webinar today. I'm also going to give you a couple of technical tips for our application process, and then I'm going to turn it over to the team to take it away before we start answering your questions live. This webinar will be recorded and will be posted on our community grants page on the OCF website. We have turned all participants on mute and cameras are off. Please feel free to turn on transcriptions in your settings if that would be beneficial. For some context, for the first half of our hour together today, we are going to go through a presentation that will feature several pieces of key information about this particular cycle and also our community grants program at large. We're going to highlight what program officers and our grant evaluators are looking for in strong competitive applications. And we're even going to review a couple of sample responses to help bring that to life for everyone. The second half is going to be answering the questions that you've posed, either when you registered for this webinar or questions that we've been hearing from you so far. And then we'll end with the live Q&A where you'll be able to type in your questions and our entire team will begin answering them. We are going to ask for you to hold off on sending those questions through that Q&A feature until we get to the end of our presentation. We're hopeful that we will answer many of them before we get to that section. Finally, for housekeeping, if this is your first time applying, or maybe your question is really specific to your particular proposal, those types of questions are going to be probably better answered with a personal connection with your regional program officer. You'll get to meet all of them in just a minute. Those types of questions are often more detailed and takes more explanation that isn't always easy to do in a quick Q&A chat. So if you feel like that fits for you, please know we invite you to reach out to your regional program officer. A couple of technical things. As you know, we have launched a new nonprofit portal called My OCF. There's a lot of really exciting new features that are going to be, I think, of a great support for our nonprofit community. And since this is our first community grant cycle using the new portal, there are a couple things that we wanted to make sure we were flagging for you. If you need help changing a password or accessing any existing page for your nonprofit, we're going to ask that you contact us through grants@oregoncf.org. Our amazing grants administration team is poised to help with all of those questions. We're going to have them on the call with us in a little bit as well. If you find yourself that you've saved your application to complete later and now you can't find it, here's a little hint. We're asking you to look for the form in process on the application history tab of your nonprofit's page. An important note that we want to emphasize a couple of times, if you're a brand new nonprofit that has never applied to any grant program at OCF, not even just community grants, if you've never applied, you are going to need to start a new nonprofit profile page, and we need to help you do that. before you can apply for community grants. That's going to take a little bit of extra time for our grants administration team to connect with you. So we're asking, if that is your situation, to please build in an extra week so that we can connect with you and make sure that we're delivering everything that you need to set up that profile page and get you able to apply. I think the headline for everybody, whether you're a new nonprofit or not, because this portal is new, we encourage everyone to not wait until the deadline, just in case you need any additional help. All right. I think we have reached the point where we're going to introduce our program staff. So I'd like to invite them all to join me on camera. You can see our staff and our backgrounds from across the state, and I'll let the team take it away. Thanks again and welcome, everyone.
Hi, everybody. My name is Peter Kukla. I'm the Regional Program Associate based in the Eugene office. I serve a statewide role and support our community grants program, and my pronouns are he, they, and I'll pass it to Angie.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Angie Blackwell. I'm Program Officer in the Salem office for the Northern Willamette Valley and temporarily for the North Coast. And my pronouns are she, her. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Ruby Buckles. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Program Officer for the Southern Willamette Valley and the South Coast region.
Hi, my name is Rachel Ohm. I'm the Program Officer for Central and Eastern Oregon. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm passing it to Amy.
Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. My name's Amy Drake. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the program officer for Southern Oregon, joining you from OCF's Medford office. And I will pass it to Kua.
Hi, folks. My name is Kua Zhang. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm one of the program officers for our metro region based in our Portland office.
Hi, everyone. My name is Itzel Chavez Gomez. My pronouns are she and ella, and I am the other Metro Program Officer coming out of the Portland office. I'll pass it over to Sonia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sonia McKenzie. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for volunteers, and I support volunteer engagement statewide, and I work out of the Portland office.
Hi, everyone. I'm Becca Perry. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the program associate in the Metro region, and I also work out of the Portland office.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Y'all can turn your cameras off. All right. We would really like to know who is here today with us. It always helps us kind of better understand who is in this webinar. So we'd like to get to know you by launching a quick poll. So in that poll, we're going to ask you where you are joining us from and how familiar you are with Oregon Community Foundation. We're going to give you about a minute and then we'll come back to it. All right. If you haven't, click that wonderful poll real quick, and then we're going to go ahead and close it so we can see those results. Great. Thank you, Peter, so much. All right. Thanks, everyone. That really helps us know who's in the audience. It looks like we have about 37%, so 184 of y'all are new to community grants, which is super exciting. And it looks like we have every region located that we serve here in the state of Oregon represented today on the call, which is super exciting. Looks like Metro Portland, you all are representing with 200 folks in the audience. That's amazing. Thank you so much. That really helps us. So one thing we just want to always encourage you all is if you are new, so those folks that said, yes, we're new to community grants, please feel free to reach out to your regional program officer. We have it back up on the slide here of who you can reach out to. It's on our website as well to connect with us, to ask questions about the application, to make sure everything is going smoothly. So when that deadline comes, it's not a frantic situation for you, especially with the new portal that's happening. Thank you again for being here, everybody. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it on over to Amy.
Okay, thanks, Ruby. So the spring community grant cycle. We're going to give you the big overview of our cycle. So this grant cycle is funding general operating support. Funds for general operating support are flexible, and they can be used for anything that support your organization, which can include, but is not limited to, things like payroll, rent, utilities, whatever your greatest need is during the grant period. However, you are not eligible to apply for this upcoming cycle if you received a community grant in 2025. Many of you may know that there were 2 grant cycles in 2025, one in the spring and one in the fall. If you applied but were not awarded in either cycle, you are eligible to apply. If you're unsure if you received a community grant, you can reference the list of grantees on our website. And I believe we'll be popping a link into the chat too, so you can access that easily. Those of you who applied during our fall 2025 cycle will have received your award notifications earlier this week. Another point is that if you receive funding from other OCF programs, you are still welcome to apply to community grants as we review applications for each grant program independently. So this includes things like receiving support from a donor advised fund, from the Thriving Entrepreneurs Program, our Arts and Culture Rebuilding Program, and many other OCF grant programs too. Our application portal opened on December 2nd and will close promptly at 5 p.m. on January 13th. If you are awarded a grant, you will receive the funds by the end of May. And Itzel is up next to talk about eligibility.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. So who is eligible for the Community Grants Program? That'll be 501c3 organizations, tribal entities, and government entities are eligible to apply in the 2026 spring cycle of the Community Grants Program. Organizations may also work with a 501c3 fiscal sponsor to apply. Applicants must submit formal paperwork confirming their fiscal sponsorship relationship with their application. And just please note that fiscal sponsorship materials will not be accepted past the application deadline of January 13th at 5 p.m. And now I will pass it over to Rachel to cover things that we typically don't fund.
Thanks, Itzel. So there are some areas of work that we typically do not fund through this community grants program. These include animal-focused organizations, except those with direct impact for community members, individual public schools, lobbyists, organizations doing scientific research, public entities typically funded by government dollars, re-granting programs, and religious organizations. If you have questions about whether your work falls under these categories or would like to discuss your specific case, you're welcome to reach out to your regional program officer. We're happy to talk through it. And now I'll hand it to Kua to talk about our priority populations.
Thanks, Rachel. So OCF has identified cultural communities that are prioritized in our community grants program. We'll share more about how these priorities connect to our application questions and scoring rubric in the upcoming slides. These communities include Black, Indigenous, Latino, Latinx, and communities of color, immigrants and refugees, people experiencing disabilities, people living on low incomes, people living in under-resourced communities, people who are homeless or unsheltered, people who identify as LGBTQ+, survivors of domestic abuse and or child abuse. When selecting the populations your organization serves, please consider whether your organization as a whole intentionally serves the communities or communities you select rather than a specific program or project. If your organization is seeking project or program support, the next grant cycle, the fall cycle, will be announced in late spring. Applications are most competitive when they clearly address community identified needs in support of these Oregon populations and demonstrate how the priority populations chosen here are engaged in and leading your organization's work. In addition to these priority populations, the spring cycle further prioritizes 3 types of organizations that have historically experienced underinvestment. We'll dive deeper into those definitions of these organization types on the next 3 slides. Ruby will start us off with small rural organizations.
Great. Thank you so much, Kua. All right. For the spring cycle, applicants must select one of 3 organization categories: small rural, culturally specific, or culturally responsive. A small rural organization is defined as located and serving a community with a population of 35,000 or less and is not directly adjacent to an area with a population of 50,000 or more. And the applicant has $250,000 or less in operating expenses during its most recent completed fiscal year. There are a few nuances in the language which we are familiar with and we understand in this definition. So the first, when we look to confirm that where you're located and serving meets our definition of rural, we will first look at the address you provide in your application. Since this is a general operating support cycle, we are not funding project-based requests. This means that to meet this definition, your narrative responses must indicate that your organization's work overall is primarily focused on serving rural communities. We recognize that the term adjacent in this definition is a bit vague. This allows us to honor the nuances of different regions because we know travel to and from adjacent larger communities can look different depending on where you are and how the flow of resources from adjacent larger cities to smaller communities can be unique as well. Your regional program officer can help to address any questions around these nuances. However, we do want to note that the population numbers and operating budget number are firm. I'll pass it on to Amy to share more about the culturally specific organization category.
Thanks, Ruby. All right, so culturally specific organizations. So to be competitive under the culturally specific category, an applicant must show all 4 of the following. The organization must primarily serve one or more communities from our list of populations that we prioritize in this program. These communities are listed on page 2 of our program guidelines and were shared earlier in this slideshow. The leadership and staff from the organization must represent the community served in its mission, activities, and outreach, and intentionally focus on one or more cultural communities. And the population served recognizes the organization as specific to their community. And number 4, the organization demonstrates intimate knowledge of lived experience of the community, including, but not limited to, the impact of structural and individual racism or discrimination on the community, knowledge of specific disparities, barriers, or challenges documented in the community, and their influences on the structure of the program or service. We wanted to share a couple questions to help you reflect and determine if this category is a good fit for your organization. So one is, can you identify a community from our list of populations that your organization intentionally serves? 2, is your organization primarily staffed and led by members of that community that you selected? And 3, can you describe ways in which your staff or leadership from the community selected have a significant influence on the structure of your programs or services? And now I'll pass it on to Itzel to provide more insight into our culturally responsive organization category.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. So the last category an applicant can select is identifying as a culturally responsive organization. We're going to spend a little bit more time on this category because this is where we get the most questions regarding this definition. So culturally responsive describes the capacity to respond to the issues of diverse communities. To be considered a culturally responsive organization, your organization must meet all of the following. 1, provide services that have been adapted to maximize the respect of and relevance to the beliefs, practices, culture, and linguistic needs of diverse consumer client populations and communities. And 2, require knowledge and capacity at different levels of intervention: systemic, organizational, professional, and individual. And so here are, on this next slide, we'll share with you some questions to help you determine if this category is a good fit for your organization. So the first question, can your organization identify one or more communities from our list of populations that your organization intentionally serves. 2, how does your organization intentionally adapt your services to the needs of the community you selected? And 3, can your organization describe an intervention at any of the following levels: systemic, organizational, professional, or individual? And when we say intervention, we're looking for examples of ways in which you've designed your overall operations to be responsive to the issues of diverse communities you serve. We shared a few examples of what these interventions could look like in the sample answers we provided in the program guidelines. And these examples included providing services in multiple languages, integrating feedback to adapt the physical environment of your space beyond basic accessibility, and intentionally developing spaces for community building. And now I'll pass it over to Rachel and Angie to share more about the components of a competitive application.
Thanks, Itzel. So we get this question a lot. What makes an application competitive? And while there's no single right answer, reviewing our scoring rubric on page 12 of the program guidelines can help you to strengthen your proposal. If you'd like to follow along, you can find the sample answers on page 8 in the program guidelines document that's been shared in the chat. So the first thing that we look for in a competitive application is that your organization serves at least one of the OCF priority populations. So your organization should intentionally serve one of those populations outlined in the guidelines. We know many organizations serve multiple populations or work at the intersections at several. We ask that you identify the population or populations that your organization is most focused on and describe how you engage those populations in your work. If your organization serves the general population and offers programs that serve one or more priority populations, we recommend applying in a future cycle where your specific program may be better aligned with the priorities of that grant cycle. If your organization is seeking programmatic support, the next grant cycle will be announced in late spring. And then if your organization serves a population that's not listed, you'll notice we have the option to select other and to describe that community. However, we want to note that organizations that only serve an other population, a population that they list themselves, don't tend to score as competitively unless it's connected to other priority populations on that list. The second thing we look for is that your mission directly focuses on the specific populations identified in question 3, and that programs and services strongly support and advance your organization's mission. So in the sample responses, if you're following along, in the sample response for question 4, you can see how the programs and services the organization has adopted advance the goals of the organization as a support system for immigrant families in Clatsop County. So the programs are directly connected to the organization's overall work. The types of services offered in this example are adapted and informed by community voice and reflect a range of navigation services, peer supports, and connections to partner education and health agencies. And now to break it up, I'm going to pass it to Angie to walk us through the next 3 bullet points on this list.
Thank you, Rachel. So moving to the next, the community served makes up a significant portion of leadership on the board, steering, or advisory councils, or planning groups. And guidance from the community served strongly influences decision-making. So if you're following along, we're now on page 9 on the program guidelines. In sample response number 5, an organization serving people with disabilities uses an advisory council composed of its priority population. The council collaborates with staff and board on strategic decisions that shape the direction of the work. In addition to this, they use formal and informal structures to gather volunteer feedback, leading to an environment of belonging and inclusion for volunteers. And then moving on, the organization has tailored its strategies to build its relationship with the community it serves and is seen as an integral part of that community. In sample response number 6, a houses provider in Coos County prioritizes hiring from within the community they serve, which has led to 40% of their staff reflecting the community it serves. This unique knowledge then informs organizational practices and their programs and services. This organization goes on to mention that they work closely with agencies, providing similar community services to mitigate duplicating services or supports. Again, demonstrating that it's engaged in a network of other providers, ensuring it has a specific role or is filling a unique gap in this county's nonprofit ecosystem. And then sample response number 7. The organization has a clear role in its larger community network and takes a thoughtful approach to forging collaborative efforts that further support their communities. In the sample response, this organization has a strong partnership with a local tribe in order to bridge educational and cultural and artistic traditions to fill a gap left in standard education. The organization moves beyond a transactional relationship with their partner to one that directly informs their curriculum, helping to center Indigenous perspectives and deepen students' sense of identity and connection to place. We hope these explanations help illustrate how the sample responses reflect competitive responses and support you as you begin to think about your work and its impact in the communities you serve. And now we're going to take an even further dive into the sample responses, and I'm going to hand it over to Kua and Ruby.
So I can kick us off. Thank you, Angie. Question 5 is about community representation. The question is, describe how the population you identified in question 3 is involved and represented in your work. Specifically, describe your engagement in leadership, steering committees, advisory councils, and other decision-making roles. So a tip here is to make sure that each of the population you select above is reflected in the response. For this reason, we suggest only selecting populations in question 3 that you really intentionally serve, so that you can demonstrate how your organization prioritizes the unique experiences of the identified population to guide your work. And I'll throw it to you, Ruby.
Wonderful, thank you. We believe creative, impactful, and sustainable solutions come from people closest to the issues being addressed. In this response, evaluators are looking for organizations to demonstrate how community voice influences the planning, implementation, and ongoing revision of the work that you and your organization do. We pulled out a few sentences of the sample answer to help illustrate what we're looking for in relation to the scoring rubric. You can read the full sample response in the guidelines, but in the first sentence, we highlighted, we purposely recruit and train the people we serve into staff and board positions, because this shows us that the people who make decisions and guide the work of this organization are intentionally reflecting the community they are serving. This purposeful effort then leads to 40% of their leaders reflecting that community, who understand the specific needs and lived experiences of their own population. In the second sentence, the organization describes the 2 volunteer opportunities community members can take on and how their involvement directly shapes the organization through supporting the staff and board. This is particularly important because it shows us that community is truly embedded in the structure of this organization, and they don't solely rely on paid staff and leadership for input. In the third section, I almost wanted to highlight the entire sentence because it clearly shows the efforts this organization took to gather input from a range of folks who have a vested interest in the organization and directly used their feedback to inform a structural change. As you can see, we want to understand how the community you're serving are more than just your clients. They are decision makers and leaders in your work. Now I'll pass it over to Rachel to lead us into our FAQs.
Thanks, Ruby. So now that we've covered some of the basics and given you insight into what grant evaluators and program officers look for when reviewing applications, we're ready to get to the good stuff, the questions. We've compiled a list of common questions and we'll provide answers to you now, to those now in the chat. Take a look at the questions that we post in the chat, and then feel free to submit your own questions through the Q&A box, which will now open. Again, if you have questions that are really specific to your proposal, please reach out to your regional program officer. And now, to spare you from seeing our thinking faces, we're going to turn on some music, turn off our cameras. We'll stay on answering questions until we get to the last question, but feel free to log off whenever you're ready. A recording of this webinar will be posted on the website. And now we're going to get to answering the questions that you submit in the Q&A. And there are already a couple, so thank you so much.